Richard Callahan is a principal researcher in the Transportation Educational Development Pilot Program, or TEDPP. He is the Associate Dean and Director of State Capital and Leadership Programs at USC's School of Policy Planning and Development, or SPPD. His current research includes networks and state agencies, leadership training practices, leadership in information technology for executives in state government, and the political design of public agencies. He has been published in the Public Administration Review, American Review of Public Administration, and the Journal of Public Administration Research and Theory. Rich was presented with the Editor's Choice Award for outstanding contributions by the Public Administration Review in 2005. He has directed the delivery of the SPPD's graduate degree programs in Sacramento since 1998. Students include state government executives, newly elected local officials and their staffs, nonprofit and county health executives, along with legislative staff from across the United States. And Rich was awarded his doctorate in public administration by USC, which is where we are today. Rich, thanks very much for letting us talk with you for a few moments.
Great to be here.
Why did you become part of the TEDPP project?
Tom O'Brien made me. He gave me no choice. He said I had to, and Jen Giuliano, who's the Director of Contracts and Grants and the Senior Associate Dean, had spoken very highly of Tom and said they were developing this project. She said that I was perfect for what they were looking for, and I met with Tom, and he just put together a very excellent proposal and was very easy to work with. So to whatever extent things went well, I give full credit to Tom.
You took on largely, as I understand it, consideration of the need for better trained leaders, leadership within the transportation industry. Is that fair?
That's at the executive, the senior manager and executive level transportation agencies in the public sector, yes.
How did you come to believe that this sector needed better leaders, needed better training for their leaders?
Well, it was really a recognition by the Federal Highway Administration, which out of the U.S. Department of Transportation. It started with their recognition that they were looking to figure out how to invest in leadership in transportation and more broadly workforce development. And as part of the workforce development, the leadership aspect. And so we had worked with myself and others in our school developing leaders across the public sector. And I'd also was uniquely situated because I had served on one of the large transportation agencies in Los Angeles as one of the board members, the Los Angeles County Transportation Commission. So I was familiar with the context of transportation in LA and the complexities of it, and also being in Sacramento with Caltrans. And so it fit from not only what I was used to teaching and developing and designing and delivering curriculum, but also the context of understanding transportation. I'd actually worked with the leadership in transportation that brought the Red Line and heavy rail, the subway to the LA region. So I was familiar with that context very well.
So in all of this experience, you had personal experience of why a course in leadership would be a useful thing?
I saw the difference that the leaders in LA County, the Tom Bradley, the elected officials, Tom Bradley, Ed Edelman, Kenny Hahn had made as elected officials in improving and building the transportation, having a vision for it, and the importance of the appointed officials. The John Dwyer is really one of the underappreciated heroes of LA as we know it now, who was director of the RTD when they received funding, and board members like Marv Holan and others who were instrumental in having their leadership was instrumental in moving Los Angeles forward to be a 21st century metropolitan area. And I saw the difference that leadership made, elected and appointed and career leadership. And so I was very much aligned with what the US DOT wanted to invest in.
Tell us about the effort to create the transportation leadership course that has been piloted as part of the project.
So it really involved, and it involves our principal. I learned this from our school's faculty, the then School of Public Administration, the Chet Newland, who had headed up the Federal Executive Institute, as faculty, Ross Clayton, Bob Biller, Bob Myrtle. We have a process of really getting very close to the customer and understanding and custom designing leadership programs. So the process was to really talk to leadership executives and say, what are the needs? So I talked to Jeff Morales, who had head up Caltrans, and did a series of interviews at the state and local and regional levels so that the design of the program was informed by people who were very close and had been executives in transportation, as well as the experience and knowledge that I brought in and others from USC.
What was the actual development process? How was the course designed?
So the first piece was to set up interviews with a range of transportation professionals and experts to take the themes. There's two pieces that come out of that. Leadership content, what's important to understand in transportation. One of the pieces is always the finance, the intergovernmental relations, contracting out came out as big. The other were the leadership processes, communication, strategy, building teams. And so from the interviews, figured out the content and the processes, and then looked at the work that we had done in working with other public sector executives and saw what could inform those sets of findings from other work. So it was a combination that drew on our experience and the professional needs in the field.
What kind of professionals did you recruit for that first class that took place in October 2010?
I was not sure until I showed up at class. And then when they did the class introductions, I basically, about a third of the way in, stopped and started writing down the different types of agencies, and had a really quite wonderful graduate assistant on this, Juliet Lee. And she had done a great job of really operationalizing the ideas I had for outreach. And so we ended up with this wonderful intergovernmental dimension, this vertical dimension of federal, state, regional, city, harbor officials, local government officials, and this horizontal dimension of public sector, primarily public sector, but also private sector, the large consulting firms that were involved in it. And so we had that public-private in the same program. And so the outreach literally could not have worked any better. It was exactly the cross-section, because not only were we delivering the leadership program, we were learning from this experience to inform the curriculum design so that the final product turned over to the U.S. Department of Transportation had already been tested out, and we were getting not only sharing knowledge, but we were looking to find out what would work on this hybrid type of class of in-class and online, because the federal government wanted us to develop this primarily as an online class.
And that's a good point. I knew the course was intended eventually to be developed as an online course. Why did you decide, you and others in the project, that in this first effort, the pilot program, that it should be face-to-face?
What we did was an initial session face-to-face and a final session face-to-face, and the 10 weeks in between the 10 modules were online. And leadership is really a contact sport, and or it's not even a sport, a contact activity. And so that face-to-face is the essence of leadership. You don't find Art Leahy leading the MTA by emailing board members. He's meeting to them face-to-face. And so the challenge in leadership is that it involves working with people. And so we had that in, and we did exercises and simulations and pieces that could be only taught in person in the front end and in the back end as well, so that we used that class time for skill sets that could be taught and needed to be taught in person. And then we used the distance learning pieces for processes and content that could be learned and through the readings and the videos and the internet and the blogs that they wrote could be done over the internet.
Now that you've done this a couple of times, are you still very confident that this hybrid approach is the way to go?
In reality, my preference would be all face-to-face. The reality of both distance and time demands suggests that a hybrid model allows people to be involved in this without having to travel to the class. But my experience and the work that I've seen out there to develop the highest level of talent, as much personal interaction, both as a faculty, as a facilitator, and with each other. So what the hybrid model allowed us to accomplish was they got connected, the participants, these executives, they were able to connect with each other even when they were from the same agency in a much deeper way than before, and build relationships that would endure the closing of the finishing of the class. So, but the distance learning piece accommodates the ability when people are spread out over a region and you just can't pull everybody physically together.
So would you call it a compromise?
You could call it accepting the realities of the world as we find it, and trying to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's good what we have accomplished here, and this hybrid model allows for that face-to-face as well. So it accepts the challenges of working with people carving out their schedule.
I want you to be able to say really anything you'd like about the content of the course, what you actually delivered to this lucky group of people. But I think a highlight certainly was this exercise, which we captured some of on video, that depended in part on dominoes and poker chips.
Oh, the metaphor. It was developed by the Marshall School of Business. It's a fascinating exercise that is entirely dependent on the participants. It looks like it's dependent on the two rules of the game for the exchange of dominoes and chips, but each time we run it, it varies, and the Marshall School has successfully used it not only in the United States but throughout the world. And it allows people to, one of the major takeaways that we want from this is to see that the participants matter, that who's working on it and that people matter. It's not a set of rules or a set of givens, and that's very important in leadership because by extension the principle that they learn from that is leadership matters. And so it sets a context of really saying what you're learning in this coursework is valuable and invaluable as you move forward, and applying it to real life, which is much tougher than exchanging dominoes and chips. So the dominoes, there's two rules. Each participant starts off with 2 poker chips. There are red, white, and blue poker chips, and then they exchange the chips for dominoes, for a domino. And you survive if you have a domino. So it's a survival game. But how you define survival depends on the participants. Sometimes it's defined as individual, sometimes it's defined as by table, and oftentimes it involves into the entire group's surviving. It's an iterative. They're not told how many rounds, but after the first round they get to do another round and another round. So it really allows them to see what they can learn from each other. It becomes an exercise in literally all the principles of leadership. How you build teams, how you listen, how you develop strategy. There's a time element, and it's a simulation, so they're experiencing this from the inside out. They're not reading about it, they're not observing it. And so you take the 2 chips, you need 3 chips, a red, white, and blue, to get 1 domino. And so that forces interaction with others. And then the game unrolls from there. And then the debriefing that occurs afterwards is about how did you learn? How did you progress? Almost every time we've run it, there's a case of they introduce a new technology after 2 or 3 rounds, and performance falls. So my colleague Dave Logan refers to it as the J-curve of learning. And so you think performance is going to get better, 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 better when you introduce something new, and then there's a drop-off. And then it gets better. And so they really learn this concept that with organizational change or with new technology, the expectation that we have that things get immediately better is not the expectation that occurs. And so they learn to lead through change through this. So it's originally developed as a simulation of the market out of the Marshall Business School. It can become much more of a metaphor for not just market exchange, but the public sector, and also how teams interact and how people interact in a group, and the evolution of leadership, and what are the skills that allowed them to succeed at this, and then what are those leadership skills, and then how can we talk about those going forward.
Is there anything else that you want to say about the content of the class, what was delivered to these students?
It varied. I mean, one of the most important principles that we teach in our leadership program is organizational performance is driven by organizational culture. So we're very fortunate to have a wonderful TED Talk, the Technology, Education, Design, and by Dave Logan on tribal leadership. And so the piece of this that I think we did well were the variety of ways to learn online. So we had articles that they were reading, but they weren't simply academic research articles. They were from the New Yorker, so they're well-informed, fact-checked, but they're on the London Underground, or there are these TED Talks by Dave Logan and by others. And then there's some traditional transportation or other type of leadership articles that you might see academically. But we tried to do a rich mix of articles and interactions and case studies so that you had some specifics that, and people gravitate towards stories. And we used really one of the leading figures in writing about leadership, Warren Bennis, and his work to set the stage for moving forward. And so I would say in terms of the content of the program, they got a good deal on some transportation specifics, but really 80% or more were on leadership processes. This group, the most recent group, we had originally planned to do it with one group. It went well, and we extended it under the existing contract, a second group. What I was really impressed with was how they analyzed the articles and then how they applied them to their own context of transportation. So their ability to crosswalk the lessons from the articles and apply them and say, here's what the implications are for the MTA or for Caltrans, or here, they did that marvelously with this. So that would be another comment on the content.
Now that you have offered it twice, I mean, did the course evolve in any way based on what you learned from the first go-around to the later offering?
Absolutely. It evolved in terms of understanding what were the pieces that resonated with the executives most. It evolved in terms of how we offered the in-person sessions in each one. The feedback. Both these courses were designed to get feedback from the participants. And so feedback on which articles or what TED Talks, what videos work best, what types of videos and TED Talks and readings work best, the amounts of readings, the topics that were covered. We conclude the program with asking what surprised them over the past 12 weeks of meeting, the in-person classes and the modules. So we really did drill down reflectively on what worked in the program, but also asked the question and stated, answer forthrightly, did this waste your time? And so as they're answering that and they're saying, no, it didn't waste my time and here's why, we got good information on and feedback on what worked well. And if they said, here's what didn't work, we would have liked to have seen the ability to specifically comment on an earlier person's comment, even 3 days later, or we wanted more analysis from Rich, myself as faculty, on a particular article, not just questions on it, as valuable as the questions were. That feedback is enormously valuable as well.
You went exactly where I was hoping to go, which was assessment, evaluation. Where do we take all this data? Where would you like to see this go beyond the project?
So to the credit of the U.S. Department of Transportation and Tom O'Brien as principal investigator for this, this will be publicly available. So other agencies, other universities, I believe, will be able to use the course that we developed and apply and take it, modify it, and use it to develop transportation leaders. So it should have a life of its own. I've done this previously with a project out of the Fell School of Government at University of Penn and the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where they did a network syllabus competition, and I won that nationally a few years ago. And I get emails from people saying, can you explain this to me? I want to use that syllabus in a course. And my belief is that this is designed in a way to be valuable going into the future.
So do you think that a course like this, offered really any place, has the potential to be sustainable, perhaps even revenue generating?
I would look at it as an investment. I don't know that a university or a transportation agency would look at it as a revenue producer, because it's really an investment in executive level leadership. It's not designed casually. It's not designed to be about leadership. It is designed to do leadership. And so two pieces are essential to that. One is the participants, a level of participants, that they have some leadership experience and they know how difficult leadership is. Or in shorthand, they have their own leadership disasters. So they know that just reading about it, it sounds easier reading about it than it really is. And two, you need faculty that have experience working with leaders and can draw out the most challenging questions that they have and then be able to adapt and address that. So the dynamics of each class will be different. It'll be around key themes, but it's not like opening a can of SpaghettiOs and just pouring it on in the stove and heating it up. There's a lot that goes into the delivery and making sure it's specifically. The number one comment, or one of the top comments, was when people were being candid is, yeah, someone told me I needed to go to this, or my supervisors, my boss signed me up on it, or I kind of thought this would waste my time. And invariably, the comments I hear back are, I found this a valuable use of my time. And so making sure of that, and also figuring out how to engage people who aren't initially signing up, but how to keep them, to get them to sign up and then to participate in it.
So you have the impression that this is this kind of course, based on the data and the conclusions that will be disseminated across the country, that this is a course that could be duplicated, replicated elsewhere? Oh
yeah, I think there's talented faculty, and I mean, I work with 40 to 50 trainers, faculty, facilitators from across the country, and on different programs during the course of the year. And so I know there's a lot of talent out there and commitment to developing leaders. And take this, have someone who's good at teaching this work, adapt it to their own strength and to the needs of the participants, because it's going to vary. So I think, as with any successful program, there needs to be local adaptation. So if it's offered at the federal, you're going to change the readings a little bit. You might add a topic or drop a topic. Likewise, if it's in a different region of the country and they have different transportation needs, or there's a different set of, I mean, you might offer in a part of country that has a lot of, a different set of politics than you have in California. And so you might want to have 3 modules on politics and navigating in a political environment, navigating and negotiating in a political environment, as opposed to the 1 or 2 sections we have now.
We're just about done. I just want to give you another chance to talk about zooming out to the whole project, the value of this project, the results that are delivered, the results that have been delivered. Any general closing thoughts?
I give an enormous amount of credit to the U.S. Department of Transportation and to Tom O'Brien, the faculty at Long Beach, who's the principal investigator, because this is a program that invested in developing leaders. And societally, we don't do that investment well. And we don't recognize how much of an investment it takes to develop really effective leadership. When you look at someone who's proven to be an enormously effective leader in the public sector, General David Petraeus, he's been developing his leadership skills since entering West Point. Likewise with his colleagues, and they're faced with life and death decisions and development of strategy and application of leadership. And we recognize the importance of that and we invest in that. And societally, the idea of investing in the importance of leadership in transportation, that's just a lot of credit goes to the Department of Transportation and Tom O'Brien for recognizing that and then acting on that investment. So I think if I had to say from an overview, societally, we should be recognizing the importance of that investment in leadership, not just in transportation and other areas, but just across the board societally. And anytime we act on that investment, as our former Dean Bob Biller says, investing in leadership advantages us all.